Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the 2022 Subaru BRZ. This is the joint venture Subaru-Toyota affordable sports car for its second generation, and this is my very first experience testing out this formula. Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to drive the previous FRS or BRZ or GT86, but this new generation of Toyota Subaru twins does look to be quite promising, with a lot of the formula staying intact but improvements coming where they needed to come along. So for my video today, I can't really give you much comparison between the previous generation, and when it comes to the differences between this and the GR86, it is minor. Outside of some visual changes like the front bumper and some badges found throughout the vehicles, there isn't too much more that divides them. Really, the only thing to pay attention to is that for the Subaru, it has a stiffer rear spring rate, a softer front spring rate, and the Toyota will have larger stabilizer bars, but ever so slightly. Those changes, I don't know if you could really feel those differences on the road, certainly not in day-to-day commuting. It would be the kind of thing that I imagine you would have to be pushing those vehicles to their limits and going beyond those limits to actually tell those differences. One of the big headline figures is the upsized engine. We've gone from a 2-litre to now a 2.4-litre engine, both in the same configuration, flat 4 boxer engines, and this new motor produces 228 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque, still mated to either a 6-speed manual or automatic transmission, and power going straight to the rear wheels. There is so much to like here in the BRZ. The steering is perfectly weighted and there's a lot of vibration, but I'm not too sure that it is actual road feel. I do know that I have great precision of where the front wheels are pointing, but not all of the road texture comes through this leather trimmed wheel. The gear shifter feels fantastic. The clutch throw is a little bit short for what I would consider normal, but perfectly usable, perfectly approachable. We got a manual handbrake here. For a tall guy like me, I'm 6'3", 6'4". The seating position is pretty strong. The steering wheel, I don't really need to come out any further to me. My legs are stretched out quite nicely, and it feels like this seat was built just for me. I fit in this perfectly, and I spent about 4 hours driving one day, didn't have any aches or pains at all. You can see I've just got enough headroom to not complain, and visibility in most directions is pretty good. Can't really see much here over your left shoulder, but you have blind spot monitoring as standard, so that is a tremendous help in day-to-day driving. But enthusiastic driving, let's talk about that a little, because this engine has 228 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. With this Sport Tech, you get Michelin PS4 tires. Here, as I've already talked about, these Alcantara and leather seats. Those are really the fundamental differences between the entry-level model BRZ and this Sport Tech one. And honestly, you have to have them. These seats are tremendous, and there really isn't much to fault for the driving experience of this product. But there are two things that I'm not so sure about. For one, you might be able to tell, but there is definitely pumped in audio for this BRZ. It isn't as bothersome as I initially anticipated it to be, but I really can't hear the actual exhaust at all when I'm pushing it hard and I'm getting that noise into the cabin. I don't really think any of it is real, or the real is almost impossible to distinguish from the augmented. But here's a little bit of sound with a GoPro attached, so you can actually hear what comes out of the exhaust of the BRZ. Another small complaint is that when you're driving this about town and you're sitting at a stoplight, you pop the car into neutral and you don't have the clutch engaged, I do find this engine clatters a bit like a diesel. It's not the nicest sound. It does vanish if you have the clutch in, which I find quite interesting, but just something you might pick up on if you drive this product. It mostly feels like this car has no roll in the corners, but there is certainly some on the limits. That's just the laws of nature doing her own justices, but it never feels ever like a sloppy driving experience. There's enough torque that even in higher gears you don't need to downshift. Another thing I really like about this baked-in formula is that how you drive it is how it is. There's really only one mode to change a dynamic feature of this Subaru, and that's the traction control buttons that you have down here in the center console. One just turns it off and the other opens up the track mode that gives you a different digital layout, even though, if I'm honest, I haven't been playing around much as I am not a confident enough driver to turn off my traction control systems when I'm just going for a little bit of a late night drive. All of the major touch points in the cabin of the BRZ feel quality. Even though it is a dark space in here, it doesn't feel gloomy, it doesn't feel miserable, and I think that is because where you rest your elbows are nice padded touch points. Even when you have this center console lid open, there's enough padding on the lip of it, so you could put some water bottles in there, rest your elbow there, and not get a bruise. And take note that there's no piano black plastic in sight. All of the surfaces and main touch points are a matte or less than glossy plastic. The Alcantara that's trimmed up along the top of the door cards and the hood over the gauge cluster just adds a sense of premium to this vehicle, and it didn't really need it, but it makes it just feel a little bit more special. The digital dashboard is actually a lot sharper of resolution than I was anticipating, and the 8-inch touchscreen is very basic, nothing to play around with, but with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, that's all I'm ever going to be using that screen for anyways. Subaru claims a 0 to 100 run in 6.1 seconds. I haven't felt the need to verify that. Feels as quick as advertised. And the most enjoyable statistic, if we can call it that, for the BRZ is that you have a G meter here on the digital instrument cluster, and you can compare your previous trip's G's to your current one. You've got a reading from how hard you accelerate and decelerate, and that's a little bit of a distracting feature, but makes regular driving just all the more entertaining. You come up to a nice twisty bit of mountain road and you wonder to yourself, oh, could I push it just a little bit further and get half a G, 0.6 of a G? And this is all coming in at a very approachable, very affordable price point. I'm sold on the looks of the BRZ, and the biggest decision you have to make in terms of exterior design is really which front grille, front bumper treatment do you prefer? I think I prefer this, but I do have an annoyance that the bracket mounting for a front license plate has these holes pre-drilled, so if I were to actually buy this car, I'd have to cover it up just for the sake of my OCD running wild. And not only is this an affordable sports car, it's perfectly usable day to day. You've got those rear seats that admittedly can't fit anybody above the age of 5 unless you have no head and no legs, but you can just drop it down and it becomes this perfect shelf if you needed to bring something along, like a set of golf clubs or something to pack up for a weekend getaway, an easy carry through to the trunk. So you could certainly have more flexibility in this than what you could an MX-5, and that is certainly one of the only direct competitors to a vehicle such as this, and that does come at a bit higher of a price point, but then you've got to decide for yourself what kind of vehicle suits your life better. Do you want a convertible or not? Do you need a smaller car? Do you need a bigger car or not? Those are all the kind of things to decide. But when it comes to driving experience, neither of those products you have to make excuses for, really, because it's been a long time since I've been in a vehicle that I just wanted to go for a random aimless drive just so I could experience what's going on, and that's what this BRZ has delivered for me. It's tremendous to drive, very nice to be in, and my nitpicks are minor. I've spoken about the clattering of the engine and that pumped audio that I'm not too sure about. Couple other things to rifle them off. I always find these non-clicking indicators bothersome in whatever car I'm in. I'm surprised that new cars are even coming out with them. I thought consumers were fed up with them as a trend. So that's something you can get used to, but it isn't optimal. And if there was one feature I could ask for, it was a heated steering wheel. And that's it for my complaints. That's how joyous of an experience this BRZ has been for the past couple days living with it. So should you go out and test drive one, buy one, live with one? Yes, all of the above. I am deeply, deeply impressed with this product. I really wish I got to try one out sooner, and this isn't something that I would ever really consider with a car, but it feels like the fundamentals are so good that if I were to own one, modifying really wouldn't overwhelm this experience at all. Not saying it's underpowered or not exciting, but this just feels like a great foundation where all of the fundamentals are exactly as I wish them to be. So that if I owned a vehicle like this, I really would want to make it my own. So thank you very much for taking the time to watching this video, and I hope to see you again on the channel soon.